watched Babylon the other day, and this is a movie documenting, like a fictional documentation, of course, of like the 1920s, the late 1920s to the 1930s, when they were trying to incorporate sound into film. And I was impressed. Even though I'm a person who is recently very interested in film, I had not done a lot of historical facts on films, and so it was a surprise to learn that there's a time that they were just showing pictures without sound. So they'd show like a title card explaining the footage that you're about to see, and then they'd show the footage, and that's how the films were. And it was so interesting to me, and so I wondered, can I do like a historical thing about the Kenyan filming industry? And so I went in, I have looked at a few papers. I'm going to I'm going to link down all the places where I got all this compilation from, if you're interested to find out more. And yeah, this video is just like the history of film in Kenya, starting from like the first shot to where we are now. And it's not the most compact or full thing, because there's more, but I hope you enjoy. So the year is 1909. President Theodore Roosevelt of America is coming to safari to Africa. So finally he comes to East Africa. He goes to Kenya, Uganda, Congo, and Sudan. This is a year-long expedition, and so he comes with a British photographer called Cherry Keaton, and this person is going to document the whole expedition, and they're going to make a documentary out of it. So the documentary mostly involves just the travel of Roosevelt along with his party, those are his homies, through Kenya. So showing the areas, the people, the savannah, rivers, just the whole journey, and mostly hunting, because yeah, that's the major thing that brings you to Africa, right? Hunting, especially in those days. And even in these days, some people just come to hunt. Zambia, Tanzania, I think even in Kenya. Sorry for another day. At the end of this 1 year, it is estimated that around 11,000 animals were either killed or trapped. Sorry to the animals, may your souls rest in peace, but it is what it is. And among those, we even have endangered or already gone species like the black rhino, white rhino. So sad. Anyway, this was the first film shot in Kenya, and yeah, it gave rise to the genre of travel vlogs. I'm playing the genre of travelogues, documentaries of that type, where people would come in and document their whole hunting and going through the African jungle, savannah. Please. Although this thing was shot in Kenya, the people, the Africans or the natives we see, were just really like props. This is the same way you do a travel vlog and you're going to a different country and you show the people that was their role. Or the also porters, the people who carry things for the party of the president. So they were not really playing a big role. In fact, their role was so small that in a lot of the titles in the movie, they were mistitled. Like, for example, they'd show the Kikuyu maidens at some type of ceremony back in the day, and they would title it Zulu belts instead of Kikuyu belts. Or there's a clip where they're showing some women at a spring, and of course it's Kenya. I'm not sure if these women are Kikuyu or they're like Samburu. Their costume, I called it costume. Their outfits are really, I'm not sure which community it is in Kenya. Even though I'm in Kenya right now, I need to do more research on the different types of clothing back in the day. But these people are not Zulu because they're in Kenya. So maybe they are Samburu or Kikuyu, but they were titled as Kikuyu women. They even show a Manyata, which is the house for the Maasai here in Kenya, but they title it as Kral, which is a house for the Zulu people in South Africa. So you see, yeah, they were trying to show that they know these different words, but they were using the South African words instead of Kenyan words. So yeah, the people were just there to fill in the gap, but they were not really doing a major role in the movie documentary. Now, the screening of this was done in 1910, and it gave rise to the genre as a whole. So travel logs, documentaries became a thing. People would come in to Kenya, to the rest of Africa, and do this hunting, documentary type, documentary style films. And for example, we have the Traders Horn, we have Snows on Kilimanjaro, Mogambo. These are things that arose from Roosevelt in Africa, and I guess we have a part in that because filmed in Kenya. So what were Kenyans watching in the 1940s? Because Americans already doing their films, Hollywood was kind of a thing. The 1940s, we had a lot of American films to watch for the elite here in Kenya. So the elite was like the colonizers. They would go to theater and watch American films mostly, the without sound ones. But in the 1940s, sound had started coming in. So yes, American films. Most of the natives, however, were watching propaganda. So this is propaganda for the British Empire, just stories of how heroic the empire is, praising the empire. That's what the natives were mostly being fed. Apart from propaganda films, we had educational films. So education on farming, they want to improve the farming for the native people, especially because these people were farming on the farms of the colonizers. That, you know. So we have that. We have films on like hygiene, improving hygiene. It's assumed that the African person was dirty. I don't know where they get that impression from, but we had films on hygiene. We had films on civic duty, educating the people on their civic duty to the empire, how to act, how to be a good citizen, such kind of innuendo. And then, of course, the World War came, and then we had more propaganda for the World War, just telling you which side you're supposed to be on. That's what the natives were watching at that time. So the 1950s roll in, and we have the Mau Mau uprising. I was surprised that the Mau Mau uprising, you know, I did history in school, but it was not like when you start looking at these dates, they're really recent. So I was surprised that the Mau Mau uprising began in like 1952. So with the Mau Mau uprising, we have more propaganda being shown to the natives. So this is against the Mau Mau and against rebellion, pretty much. It is said that these propaganda films against the Mau Mau kind of had a boomerang or a backfiring effect to the people, because they would watch it and they're meant to kind of hate the Mau Mau, but they would watch the films and side with the Mau Mau. I don't know how true that is, if they really had a boomerang effect, because, you know, film is a really strong tool to kind of brainwash the people. So I don't know if the boomerang effect is correct. And now let's move to the 1960s. We've had our independence. Our country is now ours. The Ministry of Broadcasting and Information has passed on from the empire, from British, and now the African people are controlling the broadcasting industry. So this is 1960s, because our independence is 1963. So tell me why the government still decides to do more propaganda films. So people are still watching propaganda for the current government, which is the African-led government. And this continues all through, like from the 1960s to the 1980s. Most of the films being produced were just propaganda, because they were under the government, under the Ministry of Broadcasting. people are saying like it would be nice if that ministry that's taking care of films and documentaries, whatever, it would be under Ministry of Arts and Culture, so that other people would be able to make films, narrate stories, so that the stories are, more nice, organic, contemporary, instead of just the propaganda stuff. Anyway, between the 1960s and the 1980s, we also had a boom in filmmaking in Kenya. We had a lot of international films being filmed here. And we also had the first Kenyan film, if you can call it that. So this is a film made by Ring Sha. Is it Sa? Okay, so this person is like an Indian-born Kenyan, so they're Kenyan, and they made their first movie in 1968. So this is just 5 years post-independence, and the movie is called Mlevi. This stands for drunkard, so it's drunkard in English. And yeah, kudos to the man.
The first Swahili film, Mlevi, which translates to a drunk in English, in 1968, that starred our very own Oliver Litondo.
Script, Swahili, the first Swahili film to be made, he came with a script. He brought in people from Hollywood, from Bombay, to come and do the production. And that was a film, the first locally produced film that I can remember, Mlevi. I have looked for that film, by the way, I can't find it.
But yeah, he started the whole thing. We even have another Kenyan, Alan Root. They sound white, but they are put down as Kenyan, so this person made documentary, hunting documentary, is in the jungle type of films. And just like Roosevelt had started, so this person, who is a Kenyan, Alan Root, came into the genre, and they made a lot of money because they won awards, many different awards around the world for their film. So in the 1980s, we have Out of Africa, which is like a biography of Karen Blakiston. This is an immigrant who came to Kenya in 1913. I call her an immigrant because that's what she was, but she did not stay, so she was like an expert because she went back home. Okay, 1913 she came. She had this dramatic life. She lived at in Karen Ngong Hill, Tapochini, and I've gone to her house, the museum. It's really nice. She had this dramatic story, so they made a movie out of her story in the 1980s. In the 1980s, we also had the rise and fall of Idi Amin, shot in Kenya. So a lot of international things were happening in the scene. And kudos to Kenya. They said it's because Kenya is beautiful, so it's like a really nice destination for films. So from the 1980s, let's move to the 1990s to early 2000s. So River Road is a street in the Nairobi CBD that sells, up to now, even up to now, sells electronics, entertainment equipment, TVs, radios, speakers, all of that stuff. And these are the people, because they're selling these things, they're the people who want the most entertainment. Because if you have things to watch, again, at least you'll buy these things to be watching it with. So the industry to create films is born out of River Road, and they call it Riverwood. So the filmmakers there, these people are just coming up with money by themselves to make these videos. So they are saving up, doing fundraisers, whatever it is, so that they can have money to create films. And a lot of films are born during this time. So these films mainly just tell the normal Kenyan story, contemporary mostly, like city life, because it was really a thing coming to Nairobi, doing the thing in Nairobi. So we have a film like Naliaka is Going, which is a story of this 14-year-old girl who comes from the village to the city to be like the house help of this family, and just the experience for her, seeing new things, etc. So this was a common occurrence late 90s to the early 2000s. So yeah, you can see people trying to tell their stories, you know, how they're living them, is what I can say. And so Naliaka is Going was like the first film to be put on VHS and sold around. I don't know exactly how. I did not get a lot of information on how these new upcoming filmmakers over there in River Road were distributing their films, but you know, they were getting distributed. They came on TV. Growing up, I remember watching things like Tausi, Wingula Moto, which of course were just contemporary regular stories of like the modern Kenyan. And yeah, that's where the film industry boomed from. So what are Kenyans watching 2010s? From the 2010s up to now, I can say like we're still watching a lot of international media. So we have like telenovelas, mostly coming from like Mexico, Philippines, that kind of thing. We have movies, mostly American movies, British, and then Nollywood blew up around sometime. Nollywood blew up, Bollywood. So we are seeing a lot of Nollywood movies, Bollywood movies. These are Indian movies, and the Kenyan industry as well is growing, so we are seeing a lot of industry things. The government at some point put out an order or some sort of law that the local Kenyan media houses should play at least a third of Kenyan content on telly. And I guess since then, the Kenyan productions or Kenyan films have been increasing in, of course, in number. We have different types of production apart from movies. We have TV shows, we have reality shows, we have like game shows, types of setups. In the movies, we have a diverse range of genres. How have Kenyans been viewing films? Like, which medium have we been viewing? And so yeah, let's get into it. The first theater or movie theater put up in Kenya was put up in 1913. Not much information is available on who actually brought up the building, like built the building, or which year. I'm seeing some sources say it was built in 1906, 1905, 1912. I don't know the truth, but in 1913, there's this Jewish businessman called Simon Medic, aka Teddy. People call him Teddy, and he's the one who came up with this idea for a theater in the CBD because, you know, Nairobi had a lot of elite colonizer men and women, maybe, who wanted to be entertained, entertainment spots, and we did not have a lot of entertainment spots in Nairobi at that time. In fact, the only other place for entertainment was in Parklands, and I guess it was like a club. So this was the second entertainment place, and this person brought it up and decided it's going to be a theater, and so he called it the Theatre Royale on 6th Avenue. 6th Avenue is now Kenyatta Avenue, and this building, the Theatre Royale, is now it's Cameo. It became Cameo Cinema, and then now it houses Nairobi Water, and it houses a few casinos. So basically the place showed movies, I guess, once a day, or starting from 3 p.m. to late, and they would show just 2 movies for the whole week. And yeah, to watch a movie you'd have to part with 3 shillings, and you'd go in, watch a film. Apart from this being a theater for showing films, it was also like a meeting place. So the High Court would meet here, and a lot of these elite colonizer people would meet there for their meetings, discussing whichever war they were having with Germany, discussing this and that. And they would also meet there to like welcome the new arrivals to the colony. It was just like a fun place to hang out. So when the World War came, the Simon Medics, aka Teddy guy, gave out this place to the government, and they used it as a recruitment center for volunteers who wanted to go to the war. After like the war died down, they used it as a theater for plays, like a garrison theater for the army people. Yeah, and so I guess it dwindled a bit from there until it was bought in the 1960s, and there's just a history of it. But the point is, because I have digressed, what I wanted to talk about is how people were watching. And yes, from the 1930s, the elite in Kenya would have, they had a theater to go and watch mostly American films and maybe some British films here and there. It wasn't until the 1940s that the natives caught up, because in the theaters the natives are not allowed to come in and watch. So in the 1940s, the government brought up these mobile cinema vans, and this was the method where natives got to watch. Because you remember I told you natives are watching propaganda? Yes, it was through mobile cinema vans, and this would go from place to place showing whatever subject of film that the government wanted the people to see. In the 1950s, Kenyan, the government, the empire, put up a few drive-in, not a few, it's only two drive-in cinemas over here. It's so interesting. I wish we still had drive-ins, but one was on Thika Road drive-in, and we have Bellevue drive-in. We had the state of emergency 1952 to 1960. So in this period, the natives are not really watching because the mobile vans were disbanded. They wouldn't go because, Mau are doing whatever they're doing. We have a state of emergency. We cannot risk our vans. So the people are not watching in that period. For 1966, as I said, this is past independence. We have a new government, and the government wants to create more propaganda films. So they bring back the mobile cinemas. And by the time it is 1980, we have like 15 mobile cinemas. That's a lot. Still under the Ministry of Broadcasting and Information, so it's just propaganda. And it is said that around 1980, these mobile films had the second largest viewers or audiences in Kenya, being second to radio viewers or audiences. So you can imagine a lot of people were watching this. Whatever propaganda or idea the government wanted to put to people was flying, like it was moving so fast. Anyway, I have to say that around the 80s, people had started getting TVs. So the first TVs in Kenya came in around 1961, 1962. They broadcasted around Limuru because that's where I don't know what it is was, and it broadcasted like a small radius, 24 kilometers. So that's before independence. Post-independence, again, just the technology is increasing, and by the time it's 1980s, a lot of people, especially in the urban areas, are starting to get TVs, and this is how they're viewing their films or their media, and it's mostly, like the one channel for the government. So by the time it's the late 1980s, to the 90s, whatever, we have more technology coming in. We have cassette tapes, all of that, so people can buy their tapes in the shops and come watch their films at their discretion, whichever films they want. And then now, 2010s to now, we have different ways, like it's infinity ways of accessing film or accessing media. The internet, subscriptions, cable TV, sijui nini, free TV, free to air, analog, digital. So we have a lot of ways to access media, and that's where we are right now. Now, talking about like local production, as I said, 1968 we had our first one, Mlevi, done by Ring Shah, and Since then, I guess I also mentioned Riverwood came along, and we have different producers, filmmakers just springing up. So there's not a lot of condensed research on how the film production space originated, because I think it was just like the effect of everybody wanting to make, and people just come up with their money and make films here and there, vernacular films, what films, and yeah, the industry just cropped up out of that. But now coming on to the 2010s, we have the entrance of international film makers or international production house partnering with local people, local actresses, local productions to make different things. We have like how MTV came in to do the Sugar series, and went on to do like this series as well in Nigeria as well as South Africa. We have the entrance of people like Netflix. These people come in, if they see a production that was done really nicely that they like, they license this to show to their platforms. We have the entrance of things like Showmax, Maisha Magic, who commission producers and productions to create nice films for their platforms as well. And this is growing from day to day. We see the entrance of international players into the local production space, just because watu walijituma and they started doing the films by themselves. You can also attract people from the international market to come commission or buy your license for some time or collaborate on projects. So it's an exciting space to be for like filmmakers. If you have a story to tell, different types of stories, could be like historical, could be like fiction, all types of stories. You can find collaborators from around the world, and we are seeing them and we are enjoying this piece. Odeon Cinema was started by a guy called Oscar Deutsch, and he wanted this to be like a franchise, to be Nairobi, Nakuru, different places. So this was not started too early, like 1913. It was started huko kitambo, 1950s I think, or 1940s. So Kenya was looking good as a colony. People were coming in. It was prospering. They were not even thinking that the Mau Mau would arise or anything like that. So the prospects were high for Kenya. So this guy started the Odeon Cinema in town, and then franchised it. It was supposed to be franchised to other places. Unfortunately, Mau Mau Rising came in 1952, and he had to sell it to an Indian Kenyan. So this Indian Kenyan unfortunately did some unwise business decisions and lost the business. He had opened a franchise in Nakuru, so there was an Odeon in Nakuru, but this was registered under a different company. So when he had to sell the Nairobi one, he did not sell the Nakuru one. I'm not sure when the Nakuru one finally bowed out or if it's still there. But again, Odeon, the cinema was sold to church. I guess, kuna nuru gizani. And then right now it's Nairobi Aviation College, some other shops over there. And yeah, that's the fall of Odeon. So we have one cinema called Shan Cinema in Gara, and this mostly showed like Indian movies. And so, but right now it's the Dome, and this is where the Sarakasi Trust is housed. And I guess that's like the best outcome really, from a theater to like something nice like a Sarakasi, because Sarakasi is an arts enterprise. They have a lot of like art stuff going on there. And yeah, earlier on I talked a bit about the Royal Theatre, and I feel like the story of that theatre up to now is really interesting, and I want to touch on a bit about the cinema, as well as Odeon and the Shan cinema. So let's go into it. So I had told you that it began in 1913, right, by this Simon Medix guy. So after a while, you know, the World War and everything, I think this is 1960s, early 1960s, Simon Medix sold this to somebody called Carlton, also a businessman. And then, so this Carlton guy, apparently he goes to 35 countries around the world looking at just movie theaters, their design, and getting inspiration. It's just, it was dramatic. But he comes back to Kenya and he's implementing what he's seen out there to this Theatre Royal. So he does a few redesigning in the theater. He puts like some pillars. I hear that the pillars are still there. I've not been into that building, but you know, I want to go. I'll go now. So he redesigns it, and he rebrands the theater to now it's called Cameo Cinema. And so after him we have a few other directors. So we have now Kenyan directors. So we have an Indian called, I think it's Asha. Yes, it's RP Shah. So we have RP Shah, and he comes with his nephew, another Shah, somebody Shah. And then we have Noah Kamau. And Noah Kamau, of course, is Kenyan. These others are Indian Kenyans. And Noah Kamau apparently had a few small cinemas in Nairobi Eastland, so like Bahati, Makadara, smaller cinemas. I'd like to see how those were. I hope I get pictures to put here and also to see myself. So these three directors come to own Cameo Cinema, and they also do like a few redesigning, a few touches for themselves. So upstairs is where the cinema is and people watch movies, and then they redesign the bottom place to have like games. So they had pinball and a few other games. It was set up like a restaurant type of thing. And yeah, it starts attracting like a younger crowd. And you know, by this time, the 1960s, we have a lot of other theaters. It's not like 1913 when this was the only theater in Nairobi and the only other entertainment place apart from the other one in Parklands. So this attracts a lot of like the younger crowd. Apparently in the 1970s, 1980s, people would sneak out of school, like the high schoolers, to come to this Cameo Cinema to watch movies and just hang out. I feel like people still do that today, but that would have been interesting, right? Like just a few years ago, again, like it's just weird to see how time flies. Just a few years ago, they were not even allowed to go into the theater before independence, but now it's like 20 years later. Okay, technically these people did not see colonization, right? The people who were in high school in 1980, yeah, they were born post, so I guess it's okay. Yeah, they would sneak out of school to come play and just watch movies and all of that. And even though this created a lot of like customers for the theater, it wasn't really a nice plan, because the other theaters coming up were still classic, you know, and they had more nicer equipment and all of that. But how Sasa, they brought in everybody. People would come in, hang out, leave their things. At this Sasa, it started being called the pit of fleas. Even though this term, the pit of fleas, because like roaches came in, rats, it was just nasty because of being full with kids and all of that all the time. The pit of fleas term in some research, like in some places I've read. Apparently the term came in uko kitambo 1913 when the place started, cause of the meetings that were being held there. People would come and talk, and it was just like a market mad place because of all the meetings. You know, tempers rise up, and apparently that's where the pit of fleas term came from. But other sources say that the term came from Oku 1970s, when the place started becoming trashy and dirty. So I'm not sure. You know, I believe mostly the 1970s one, royal pit of fleas. Anyway, so without saying much, the place got run down because of all that. It wasn't making profit, so the business was sold. And I guess it first became a church because they become churches first, and then sold to other businesses. And now we have Cameo casinos, and we have Nairobi water situated there. So nice history lesson for you all. Thank you for watching the video. In the research to do this, I found out there's a lot more in this film topic that I had to leave out because I cannot make this video too long, but that I'm going to research more about. Like, for example, TVs coming up in 1961, and just the evolution of television as a whole. And even the cinemas, like right now we have a lot of cinemas in the country. In Nairobi we have 3D. I want to look more into that. I want to look more into like the films that Theodore Roosevelt has done, because it's not just the one. And you know, I'm excited to just find out more. So if you're excited to do that with me, stick along, because I'm going to research a few of these topics and I'm going to post them. Yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.